this player has some previous accomplishments. He was a world finalist in 2019 in the seniors division. Also managed to get top 4 Brisbane regional in 2022. It was also the regional finalist on that same Brisbane event in 2024, and most recently world's top 128 in 2024. And he's using a very interesting team. You probably see in Ursa Luna and Farigraph, you have seen it, but I wonder how many of you have seen a twin beam Farigraph next to a Calm Mind leftovers blob in Ursa Luna. I think that's pretty interesting, Simon.
Yeah, the Twin Beam here can do a lot of work because Sneasler is a very common Pokemon in the meta. We have seen the resurgence of, like, we have seen Flamigo a lot. We've also seen Pokemon like Hisuian Lilligant. So like all these fighting types that like to wear a Focus Sash are really susceptible to Twin Beam, because not only does it hit them for super effective, it also takes them out through the Focus Sash. Also, the Terra Buck on the Ursa Luna, that is a very interesting tech, because usually you want to go for Terra Normal, you want to have that damage, but since this Ursa Luna is running Calm Mind, it can boost itself already, so it doesn't necessarily need that Terra and can go for a defensive Terra on, like Terra Bug. The other thing that we see here is Terra Stellar on Taurus, and the Raging Bull to break screens with the close combats. This is a very offensive Taurus.
Yeah, it's holding a Mirror Herb, and we also see something that we haven't seen, at least I personally haven't seen that much in this format specifically. Double Intimidate, like the good old days with Landers and Incineroar. Well, Landers is banned now, but we do have Tauros having that Intimidate ability, and Incineroar, the favor is for everyone. I think Incineroar with Intimidate is a classic. And also, something that I think is not very common nowadays, Terra Grass on the Rillaboom, opting for a more offensive Terra instead of a defensive one, Choice Specs Goldengo. And just imagine that Ursa Luna with leftovers, grassy terrain, Calm Mind, and double Intimidate support. That can become a real problem pretty easily if it doesn't have, let's say, dedicated counterplay. So really, really fun looking team here from Louis Tan's perspective. I'm also looking forward to go into the next team sheet. We do have the other one ready. It's going to be Kwan Hu from Taiwan. It's actually using a Side Spam Sun team with the Lilligant. He's doing Lilligant, Torkoal, Indeedee, Hatterene, Gallade, Ursa Luna. A classic composition. I think everything here looks pretty standard. The only thing that is sometimes not very standard is the Hatterene does have Protect. Is not opting for something different in that slot, something like Mystical Fire sometimes. No, it's opting for Protect, so it does have the option to Protect. Usually in these teams, you see a lot of Pokemon that cannot Protect, but at least in this one, we do see 2 Pokemon that can Protect, the Ursa Luna, the Hisuian Ursa Luna, which has Protect and Sword Sense, and we also see the Hatterene with Protect, and Torkoal is as Choice Specs variant without Protect.
Yeah, definitely a standard team. The thing about this team and why it is still so strong is because there's so many modes you can go with, right? You can go with the Lilligant Torkoal. You can put things to sleep. We've seen this like in 3 matches today. A very fast Pokemon that can put Pokemon to sleep next to Torkoal that can threaten a lot of damage with the After You. And you also have this very slow mode with Indeedee Hatterene, Indeedee Gallade, so like a redirection Trick Room, and then with the sweepers like Torkoal and Ursa Luna and Trick Room that can just clean up teams if you're not prepared for it. But I think we're ready to jump into the games. So I am very excited to see what the 2 players will bring here.
Yeah, as we do see, the lead here is going to be Indeedee Gallade opting for a Side Spam mode immediately right off the bat. And we see Incineroar and Farigra from Lewis' side of the field. This is going to be a very interesting turn 1 because remember, this Gallade is actually holding the Clear Amulet, so it cannot be intimidated. And with access to Sacred Sword, Sharpness boosted, it's usually a clean one-hit KO into most Incineroars, unless it's like a very physically defensive one. But as usual, this Incineroar is one of those variants with Terra Ghost, so you could just switch out. You could go for a Terra Ghost if you want immediately. This is a very interesting turn 1 because are you going to go for the offense here? Because Farigraph could also try to reverse your Trick Room turn 1. This team also has an Ursa Luna that obviously can benefit from Trick Room depending on how it's trained. As we do see the Incineroar switching out for the Rillaboom here.
Yeah, Incineroar usually is very, has a Terra Ghost and can basically block the Sacred Sword. As we see it coming out into Farigraph, which then follows up with a Hyper Voice, gets the crit on the Indeedee, if I am not mistaken, and also activates its Throat Spray, which means this Farigraph now is a threat. So it does a little bit of chip damage with Hyper Voice, but now it is boosted. It will do a lot more damage. We see the Trick Room from the Indeedee, which means now, since the Incineroar switched into the Rillaboom, we have a Fake Out and potentially a way to reverse the Trick Room.
Yeah, also keep in mind that this Gallade does have the option to avoid those wide guards, those hyper voice, sorry, with wide guard. It has that move, but I like that play a lot from Kwan Hu because Incineroar was probably going to react there, either switching out or going for a Terra. So he said, you know what, I'm just gonna attack into your Fairy Graph. Even though Fairy Graph is a Psychic type, it is also part No More type, so it's gonna take a lot from this Sharpness boosted Sacred Sword. And indeed, it just said, I'm looking really good here. Incineroar is probably not gonna attack me because you have the pressure of the Gallade, and even if you attack me, maybe Indeedee is trying to survive because it has no item anymore because of the Psychic Seed, so knockoff would have done less damage. As we do see a helping hand coming from the Indeedee, trying to get as much damage as possible with that Gallade, but the Fake Out does go into the Gallade, stopping it from moving, and the Twin Beam here going into the Gallade is +1 because of the Hyper Voice activated Throw Spray previously, but it's not enough to pick up the KO on that Gallade.
Yeah, this is also very interesting because usually Trick Room players try to preserve this Indeedee because they need the terrain. Like the terrain and the redirections really is a really good tool, and so this Indeedee has a lot of value. But what we've seen here is that the Indeedee is still in the field, the grassy terrain is up, which means priority moves can be used by Lewis. So there was no Trick Room reverse, and maybe Lewis was actually like banking on the fact that this Indeedee might actually call the Trick Room, call the Fake Out Trick Room, and reverse the Trick Room for them. So a lot of mind games that are happening right now, and now there's also the Grassy Glide that threatens the Gallade. But we see the Follow Me. And
Yeah, this is a mind game because if you go for Hyper Voice, there's the option obviously for Wide Guard. If you go for Twin Beam, there's the option for Follow Me. There was no Grassy Glide, just going for the U-turn, I think is what Lewis locked here. U-turn to the DD is definitely going to be able to KO from that range, I think. So yeah, that's a double KO from Lewis. And I think that's not necessarily too bad if you think about it, because now this is the opportunity to bring your Torkoal. However, the Incineroar is still looking great, very healthy, and Incineroar is a Pokemon that you really want to have against Torkoal, especially if it's choice specs, because you cannot switch moves or protect. There's no terrain, as you mentioned, so you can just easily fake out something. And we have to see what's the last one. Could be the Hatterene, could be the Ursaluna. What we know for sure is that Incineroar is being sent out here. It's a nice Pokemon to have in this context because, as I said, it's great to Torkoal. You can go for Fake Out, given that the DD didn't switch out to reset the terrain, which is something that is really interesting. I think if you had Ursaluna, you probably should have brought Ursaluna to activate the Flame Orb. So it is not Ursaluna. That's why the DD didn't switch out into it. It is the Hisuian Lilligant. And it's going to be next to the Torkoal. It's causing a kind of like a weird interaction here because Hisuian Lilligant is obviously a Pokemon that gets faster in the sun, but you are in Trick Room that you actually set up with your own Indeedee. So very interesting to see this here. Obviously, this Hisuian Lilligant has the option to go for a Terra here to avoid the Fake Out, and it's a fighting type at the end of the day, so you can attack into the Incineroar as well. With the Terragos, you can avoid the Fake Out, which is what we're seeing here on the screen. The Terragos is the best option for this Hisuian Lilligant, trying to just avoid a potential Fake Out. But if you just go for a Flare Blitz here, it should be fine. Fake Out goes off into the Torkoal, as we do see the Torkoal flinching. Remember, this Torkoal cannot protect. And we see a Twin Beam at +1. Is it enough to KO? It's not because of the Tasselization. So I wouldn't be surprised if this Hisuian Lilligant goes for a close combat, getting rid of that Incineroar, as we do see the close combat. And it is enough for the knockout.
Yeah, this was a very nice turn for Kwan, because now the Incineroar is gone. Usually you want to keep that Incineroar healthy, as you mentioned earlier, and that's also why it probably switched out at the beginning of the game, because like you don't want to go for the Terra Ghost, so you can tank these eruptions because they are the heaviest or the strongest attack on the team, and so you really need to be careful and really need to watch out that this Incineroar is healthy. But thanks to the Terra Ghost, that is not the case anymore. And now since the Psychic terrain is gone, since the Indeedee is gone, there is the double Fake Out. And this is where double Fake Out, as you mentioned earlier, also comes in very handy. Because Trick Room is still up, Fridge will move first, so that means the Fake Out comes out, Torkoal cannot move, it's not allowed to move for 2 turns in a row, Twin Beam comes out, and this means this is the end for the Lilligant.
Yeah, and although this Torkoal is really powerful with the choice specs, if you cannot move to actually dish out damage, it doesn't matter how much damage you can do if you do no damage. So this Torkoal, unfortunately, for Kwan Hu, hasn't been able to get any attack, and I think Trick Room is finally over. So this Fairy Draft, a +1 with Hyper Voice is, or Twin Beam even, I think Hyper Voice does more damage here because it's single target, is going to be able to do a lot of damage, and is opting for a Terastallization, Terra Water, just maybe expecting Torkoal is going to be able to survive and doesn't want to take, a neutral fire type attack from Torkoal, and it's just going to ensure that Firegraph survives. Hopefully, the turn for him, as we do see the Terra Water coming off. Firegraph is going to go for a Hyper Voice. I think this Rillaboom does not have a horsepower. Yeah, it's just going for Wood Hammer without terrain. It's not doing that much damage to Torkoal, but as we have been mentioning, this Torkoal is choice log, so whatever move it picks here is, if it actually got the chance to move, which is not the case. Now Firegraph gets the clean Oko, and that is a win from Lewis, getting that one game event for Australia in this set.
What an explosive game. Usually you would expect the Heart Trick Room to be the more explosive side, and the other player, so the player that plays against the Heart Trick Room, to always be on the back foot, to trying to reposition, trying to get the moves in, trying to avoid those big damages, stall out the Trick Room, and then retaliate. But we've just seen the opposite of that. Like we've just seen the Trick Room. The Torkoal couldn't move. The fake outs were repositioned perfectly. The Indeedee was not preserved in turn 1, which means it was just fake out after fake out, damage after damage, and the Fergerov managed to do so much in this game.
Yeah, I was very surprised to see Kwan Hu not switching out the Indeedee to actually preserve the Psychic Terrain, because against a team with double fake out, as you were mentioning, it's really important to keep those resources that you have in your team available at all cost for the Torkoal. So Torkoal is actually able to get those really powerful eruptions or heat waves. But the fact that he tried to predict and maybe go for that helping hand that turn next to the Gallade instead of switching out, I think cost him a lot in this game. So I'm really curious to see how he's going to try to adapt into this game number 2, because obviously on paper having a really powerful Torkoal in Psychic Terrain is going to be really good, especially because this Rillaboom does not have a Terra, a defensive Terra like Water or Fire to resist those eruptions, and eruption is really powerful, especially if you can position the Torkoal next to a helping hand Indeedee in terrain. But that's not something that Lewis allowed his opponent to do. So I'm really interested to see if that's going to change in this game 2. As we do see the screen now, we're going into game 2 in this set, and we see another Indeedee Gallade lead and another Incineroar Firegraph lead from both players.
Yeah, the question now is, what will both players do, right? There's so many options. There is the Sacred Sword into the Incineroar, but we've seen game 1 that was not the play that Kwan opted for. Is there going to be another Sacred Sword into the Farigiraf? Because last game, the Farigiraf was the main sweeper for Lewis. So what's the play, right? Are you going to go for a safe Trick Room? Because then you can follow me Trick Room. Are you going to risk the knockoff with the Hyper Voice into the Gallade? There's questions over questions and turns that both players have to get right now in this very specific first turn.
I think Incineroar is really important for Lewis to keep alive, so you don't want to risk it, because it's your main answer to Torkoal, right? So, especially because, as I've been saying, this Rillaboom does not have a defensive Terra Stabilization. So I think switching out Incineroar makes a lot of sense here. There is a helping hand this time around. No Trick Room from the Indeedee. Let's see if it goes into the Firegraph. Firegraph actually goes for a Protect, just trying to scout what the opponent is going to do, bring in the Rillaboom, and as we do see the Sacred Sword going into the Firegraph, not into the Incineroar. Once again, Kyungha saying, like, you're going to switch out that Incineroar. I know it's important for you, so I'm not going to bother attacking that slot. And that's a perfect protect from Lewis' side. And you bring the Rillaboom. You can now go for a fake out. Let's see if Indeedee switches out here to kind of have that Psychic Terrain in the back, as we were saying in the previous game.
Yeah, a lot of Rillabooms have opted to run high horsepower over the U-turn recently, but in this specific moment, U-turn is a very good tool that you can use to reposition, because now we have the pressure of fake out, we have the Hyper Voice option, but do you really want to go for that, right? Do you just not want to recycle your Trick Room, like your fake outs, because they were so helpful in the first game, and we've seen that Kwan has not protected their Indeedee. So maybe if you're Lewis here, do you really want to fake out, or do you just want to reposition? We see the Gallade leaves the field, maybe to reposition, maybe to like get the Trick Room set up and the sweeper already on the field. Torkoal comes in its stead, but the question is, what is the Indeedee going to do here?
I think it's going to go for a Trick Room. There is a fake out into what was the Gallade, which is now a Torkoal. Hyper Voice comes off from the Firegraph, but Indeedee is probably going to click Trick Room here. So Torkoal is finally positioned in Trick Room, but unfortunately for Kwan Hu, it's not full health. It had to take that Hyper Voice from the Firegraph before the +1, so at least it didn't take a +1 Hyper Voice, just a regular Hyper Voice, and it's going to recover a little bit of health because of the grassy terrain, so it's around 50%. It's able to go for options. This Rillaboom doesn't have the option to respond to that potential fire type attack. So it has to switch out. And if you want to switch out, you obviously have a great switch in Incineroar. I wonder if the Fire Graph is going to Terastallize this time around. It's just opting for a Protect. I think if you're a Quanhu, you have to switch out the Indeedee. You have to anticipate probably to the Incineroar coming, and you want to have Terrain, which we know it's something that happened in the previous game. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Gallade switching here and just instead of the Indeedee. So that way you can pressure with the Incineroar next turn, with your Secret Sword from Gallade, or you can just bait that the Incineroar is going to switch out again and just go for a Indeedee switch in, or just attack with both and go for a Heat Wave or a Rush from the Torkoal. As we do see the Indeedee switching out, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the Gallade. It's actually the Lilligant once again is brought in the Trick Room scenario, something that Lilligant probably doesn't want to be in. But there is Incineroar switching, as we were talking about, and I wonder if this Torkoal is going to go for a Heat Wave or a Weather Bolt, or maybe an Earth Power and calling that Incineroar switching.
Yeah, there's so many options. There's we definitely see the Terra here coming out. This might be the Terra on Torkoal. Yeah, this is the Terra Fire to boost Torkoal's damage output, because we know Rillaboom cannot Terra out of this. So Rillaboom is forced to stay a grass type. The Terra Fire definitely boosts the damage by a lot. We see the Protect here on the Farigiraf just to stay safe, scout out a turn, see what's happening. The Heat Wave comes out, goes into the Protect, and probably doesn't do that much to Incineroar either. It is Sun boosted, it is Specs boosted, but it still is not enough. It is not even a 2-hit KO. So this means what is Farigiraf going to do now, right? I understand the Lilligant switch, because now if the Farigiraf goes for Terra Water to resist the Heat Waves, there is the Solar Blade that can follow up on that. So you cannot easily reverse the Trick Room.
Yeah, there are so many options here. You can switch out the Torkoal into Indeedee, go for a Solar Blade into the Farigiraf, predicting that Farigiraf is going to go for a Water Terra. You can also do the other way around and switch out the Indeedee into the Lilligant slot. But I think the Lilligant, even though is in Trick Room and is not going to enjoy that in terms of the speed interaction, as you mentioned, is carrying that Solar Blade, a really powerful move that is, being able to not take the 2-turn in that it would usually take because it's in the sun. As we do see the Terastallization on the Farigiraf, no switching here, so there is no Indeedee coming in. There is the Terra Water Farigiraf. What is this Incineroar going to click? Is it going to click Flare Blitz? Is it going to click Fake Out? Is it going to click Knockoff? There is the Heat Wave. Incineroar is definitely not clicking clicking Fake Out. Heat Wave is doing a lot of damage. I wonder if that's a critical hit. No, it's not a critical hit. It was a high roll this time. And Hybrid was just safe because obviously with the Terra Water, your Farigiraf is going to resist that Heat Wave that Torkoal was locked into. And because you are guaranteed to be slower, so you're moving first in Trick Room, Hybrid Bolt Flare Blitz was a really safe play to ensure that Lilligant cannot get to move in this turn specifically. So that's a clean one-hit KO into the Lilligant, and also the Torkoal was KO'd, meaning that this game is now down 2-4, I think, for a Lewis advantage.
Yeah, and this Farigiraf has once again done so much work. Torkoal is usually the Trick Room sweeper, right? Torkoal is supposed to do so much damage, but this Torkoal cannot catch a break. There is a Terra Water on the Farigiraf, which means it resists it. You cannot click Terra Fire Eruption because you took so much damage on the switch. And now, Trick Room is still up, and Farigiraf is probably the slowest Pokemon on the field. It depends on the Incineroar speed, but we've seen before, this Farigiraf will move before the Gallade, which has the option to go for White Guard. But despite that, if it clicks White Guard, it doesn't do anything else. And you need to make progress here. You have your last 2 Pokemon on the field, and Luis hasn't even shown his last Pokemon.
Yeah, and Hyper Voice is really safe here because, as you said, if you go for White Guard, you're not attacking me, and Indeedee is a Pokemon that cannot do almost any damage in this context. So it's not probably going to click White Guard. So you're pretty safe to just click Flare Blitz in the sun against that Gallade. So it's going to come down to who is slower between Incineroar and Gallade, because that could be a factor here. It is actually that Gallade is slower than that Incineroar. Sometimes Incineroar can be trained to be slower than Mean Speed Gallade, or maybe you can hope that you're not facing a Mean Speed Gallade and just hope that you're faster. But that was not a problem because, as you said, we still haven't even seen the last Pokemon from Lewis party, and we do see here watching from home also that it is that Ursaluna that hasn't even done anything in this game, because the combination of Farigiraf and Incineroar really has been putting so much work for Lewis here. And now you have Fake Out. There's no option to stop that. Gallade doesn't have Protect. Indeedee doesn't have Protect either. So it's going to be a pretty easy fake out if you want, because I'm assuming Gallade obviously is slower than Rillaboom. So you can just stop the Gallade from moving this turn and go for a Hyper Voice, go for a Clean Bean. It's going to be enough to get that clean KO into those two Pokemon. And that's a win for Lewis. That's a win for Australia. Australia is fighting his life here. It's going now 4-3 in the record for the entire match.